right, we're going to get started. And hello, I'm Dr. Nicole Turner-Lee. I'm a fellow at the Center for Technology Innovation at the Brookings Institution. Just so people understand what I do there, I do regulatory and legislative policy at Brookings. So I work on a lot of pending issues with regards to communications policy and high tech. Also in the middle of writing a book on digital inclusion and digital equity. And when I'm not doing that, I have a portfolio of emerging technology and artificial intelligence and algorithmic bias. So I'm actually very happy to be the moderator of this panel. For the first time, for those of you that know me, I actually won't have to say a lot, which is actually very interesting because I'm normally talking. Because I'm surrounded by, as you can tell, we brought everybody to the party, a group of very esteemed and distinguished leaders in the area of digital equity that are going to make the tie to economic mobility. So the way that this is going to work out before we get started, each of our panelists will give about 2 to 3 minutes of remarks where they will tell you a little bit about who they are, what their organization is, and how they're looking at this question of digital inclusion. When they are done, I'm going to just bring back a question that brings everything together. Once that question is answered, I'm going to actually then take it to all of you to help us brainstorm what we think might be the next step. So there is some work involved for all of you sitting at these tables, so don't leave at that time. I will find you and bring you back in here so you can be part of this very engaging dialogue. So again, strap on your seatbelt and listen to, I think, people who have joined us from all over the country to actually speak about their unique experiences tackling this issue. So Clayton, we'll start with you, and then we'll just go around.
Thank you, Dr. Lee. So first of all, thank you to the IGF USA for having us, and it's just great to be in DC. I'm from New York. My company is called Silicon Harlem. I'm the CEO. Essentially, we have 2 key things that we really focus on, and that is everyone deserves a connection, everyone deserves a connection, and everything will be connected. So when we think about that type of new infrastructure, we're making sure that areas like Harlem, which is where we operate in Upper Manhattan, which by the way is the size of Atlanta, 700,000 people, we're trying to make sure that we can provide an affordable service to people so that we can close those gaps that we've been all reading about, from homework to health to employment. We also work on resiliency, thanks to the great mind of Greta B, my girl who's here. And I also want to thank Judith for putting this panel together, and everyone else. But anyway, we are very much focused on infrastructure and ensuring that all of our citizens are connected. A lot more later. I'm trying to keep my remarks very short.
Good morning. I too say thank you. My name is Monique Tate. I am from Detroit. In order to keep my remarks within a proximity of the time frame that we were given, I'm going to read. That way I will not go on and violate my time frame. But the project that I work with and represent is the Equitable Internet Initiative. Detroit tops the list of worst connected cities nationally, with nearly 60% of our residents lacking in-home broadband subscriptions and 40% lacking any connection whatsoever. In Detroit, 38% of residents live below the federal poverty level, and since 2014, tens of thousands have faced water shutoffs and evictions due to tax foreclosure, and I will say illegal tax foreclosure. We tax foreclosed on over 65,000 properties. Many of which could have been prevented. Overwhelmingly, Detroit's low-income majority African-American population is not benefiting from the private investments, improvements in city services, and infrastructural developments taking place in the 7.2 miles of about 163-mile city, keep that in mind as well, defined as the greater downtown. Less than 1% of Detroit's population lives in the greater downtown. It has the highest concentration of college-educated adults and an average per capita income that is roughly $20,000 compared to the $15,000 average for the city as a whole. And I know, of course, people on the coast listen to that annual salary and they're like, what? The Equitable Internet grew out of Allied Media Projects. It's a 9-year track record of digital media education and community technology. In 2012, Allied Media partnered with Open Technology Institute of New America Foundation to create the Digital Stewards Program, and we're referred to as Digital Stewards both here and in New York. The program trains neighborhood leaders in designing and deploying community wireless networks with a commitment to the Detroit Digital Justice Principles, which emphasize access, participation, common ownership, and healthy communities. The following year, community wireless mesh networks were prototyped in 5 Detroit neighborhoods. Mine was one of them, and I also became a digital steward. Ultimately, the Digital Stewards Program led to the formation of the Detroit Community Technology Project in 2014, and we have now developed a broader community technology education and organizing work to share our best practices. To date, we've implemented the Digital Stewards training with leaders from 10 Detroit neighborhoods and have supported 11 community groups internationally to adopt and modify the training. I'll stop the reading right there and just indicate that it's a collaborative effort. There are 3 neighborhoods that are represented in the city of Detroit. They were strategically selected because they are in the next mode of gentrification in our city. I represent one of those neighborhoods, which is the north end of Detroit. Each of our neighborhoods is installing at least 50 locations with low cost or no cost Wi-Fi internet. We, at this point, are racing to try and get 50 installations by the end of the month, and you know what day this is, but we are doing very well. We have 38 right now, and I just had a new business call me this morning wanting it also. So we are creating an impact, and behind those connections, we will also do solar backup batteries to them, because an intranet will exist amongst them as well, because we intend to create a disaster preparedness plan amongst the community so that we are able to handle different types of situations. We also, of course, have taken the youth into consideration, and we have a next gen apps group as well. They are writing apps and have already written apps. One, because in some of our neighborhoods we have some pollution issues, as well as a very high asthma rate in the neighborhood I work in. So the app they wrote was to be able to monitor the air to help to determine about things that will trigger the asthma. So with that, I'll stop until we get to questions.
Good job, Monique.
Hi, I'm Donna Scheeder. I'm the immediate past president of IFLA, which is the global voice of libraries. And I want to tell you that I was very frustrated in the last session, because I wanted to bring up the issue that none of those scenarios said anything about investing in digital literacy. We all know that there's a digital divide. The digital divide not only includes direct connections in households, so that there needs to be public access to technology, but it also means that people need to have the skills about how to use these tools and how to understand and be able to use the information that they're getting from the internet. And that is where libraries come in. So I'm going to give you a few examples of what libraries are doing. This is in the United States, because this is the USA Government Forum. But believe me, I can give you examples for all over the world about how libraries are contributing to empowering individual citizens to be able to be successful and happy in the world. The U.S. Public Library Association has a program called digitallearn.org. And the feedback from public library staff directed PLA to develop courses on the most basic skills, such as using a computer, navigating a website, and searching. Modules are video-based with narration 6 to 22 minutes long, written at the 4th grade reading level, and helping learners practice skills like using a mouse and setting up passwords. Nearly all modules are available in Spanish as well as English, and nearly 20,000 users complete 15,000 modules each year on digitallearn.org. And many public library systems have put their own brand on this. It's all available on their website, but also when people come into libraries, they can get individual help with these tutorials. Idaho's Train the Trainer program. Boise and Twin Falls may not seem like major cities for immigrants, but both have speakers of Hindi, Karen, Russian, and other foreign languages who need digital literacy skills in order to be successful in America. The Idaho Commission for Libraries, in partnership with the Idaho Office for Refugees, developed a program that trains foreign language speakers to, in turn, teach digital literacy to others in their language group. The trainers now offer workshops and one-on-one coaching sessions in library facilities and in their communities using library resources. Individuals are getting the skills they need to apply for jobs, find information for their families, help their kids with school, and live in our 21st century America. When we talk about cities, we know there's a smart city movement in the United States. One of and actually around the world, and libraries are partnering with their city and municipal governments in order to be part of helping their city become smarter. So as global competition among cities grows, there is a stronger need for libraries, not as book repositories, but as learning centers for today's knowledge economy. And often at meetings like this, I hear tech people get up and say, we need knowledge hubs. And I say, we already have them. They're called libraries. Yet in an age where computers and tablets are jumping ahead of books, how can public libraries best leverage technology to better serve their community's residents? There's a digital learning program for teens connecting young adults to interactive media tools, mentors, and institutions throughout the city of Chicago. While currently offered at 5 libraries, the U-Media, which is what it's called, recently announced it is expanding. It provides both youth and adults with introductions to 3D software, 3D printers, and laser cutting, and has recently struck up partnerships with other organizations that bolster young women's skills in analytic and programming. So there's many, many different examples based on community needs of how libraries are meeting the needs for digital literacy. But in the last session, you also heard about the red maps and the blue maps and the problems in rural America. And rural America does face significant challenges. It has the lowest home broadband internet adoption rates, the lowest employment and economic growth rates, the fewest physicians per capita, and the lowest educational attainment rate. Rural libraries are part of the solution to addressing these concerns, often providing the only free public computer and internet access and assisting patrons in gaining technology skills to pursue employment, entrepreneurship, and educational opportunities. However, they really don't have enough resources. And so when we talk about challenges later in this room, one of the things we need to talk about is the challenges faced by small rural libraries and their need to meet their community's needs and get the resources that they need to do this sufficiently. So I hope you'll think of me as the library lady, and when you're talking about solutions to these challenges, libraries will be the first word you think of.
Hi everyone, my name is Ann Schwieger and I am the Broadband and Digital Equity Advocate for the City of Boston. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here and share about how we are thinking of economic opportunity and connectivity. So we see broadband and digital equity as foundational to all of the things we care about as a city, in terms of access to economic opportunity, of course, the ability to pursue educational paths that people choose, access to innovation pipelines that we hear so much about in cities, and importantly, we also see broadband and digital equity as crucially important to democracy. We want everyone to have the tools, skills, and access to the internet that they need to protect and to affirm rights and to evolve government and the institutions of civil society to serve the needs of everyone and to protect the rights of all people. We know that there are a lot of changes that need to happen in the broadband realm in order for this vision to be a reality. To that end, we focus on 3 main areas right now. One is that we invest government resources in digital equity organizations all across the city of Boston. These organizations teach digital skills, they expand access to digital tools, and they support people in connecting to the internet at home through affordable options, or more affordable options, I should say. We also work to address the primary reasons that about 1 in 5 households in Boston do not presently have a subscription to broadband in the home. That, in a nutshell, is market failure. So we work very hard to create the conditions that allow private sector investment in broadband infrastructure to flourish across the city. We have a ways to go, but we have made progress. Right now, there are 5 ISPs who serve households in Boston. 3 are broadband cable providers, so they have a traditional cable franchise relationship with the city. 2 are, over-the-top providers, providing just internet, no cable service. And finally, we really think it's important that our constituents be connected to an internet that is a good internet. We believe that regulations and policies that protect the free and open internet, protect privacy, and enable access to affordable options are really important. So just being connected to the internet
Both teams up while out. All right, it's time for the Heathens to go. Let's turn that mics off for me.
Wow. Well, that was gonna be my speech, so they said the same. Well, if I could bring it back, my name is Katie, and I live in Knoxville, Tennessee, and I work with the SEED task force. SEED is SEAD, it's short for Sustainable and Equitable Agricultural Development. It's a rural task force of a regional Tennessee group that focuses on economic development. And so our focus, we're not tech people. We never have been. We are community people. And so what we focused on is what issues affect the leaders of our group, who are rural people, what affects them the most. And we kept coming up, we had this like brainstorming session, and we kept coming up with all of these great ideas. We wanted to do youth work, we wanted to do arts, we wanted to, do get out the vote type work, and we just couldn't do anything without the internet. And that was just the truth. It was a hard stop. So after that, we began to examine what we could do to get affordable broadband into our communities, because 34% of Tennesseans do not have access to even one broadband provider. There is the option of satellite. It often costs upwards of $100 a month, which for somebody who makes $6,000 a year is just not an option. So they're choosing between internet and like other bills and the food for their children. So we found that wasn't okay. So we started organizing at the county level. We found that local governments were a lot more amenable to our positions than the state government was. We found that county level governments really understood what the problem was. They're sometimes run by good old boys networks, but they're still more connected to folks. We passed county resolutions in over like 20 different counties, and we brought them to Nashville. And we were met with just kind of a lot of, that's okay. I don't know what's happening. Okay. Yeah. Okay. There may be another interruption, so everybody ignore it, please. Okay.
Katie gets extra time.
Well. Okay. Well, I guess, and I should say also that Appalachia is where I am, right? Like East Tennessee is a part of the Appalachian region. Y'all may have, I heard the book Hillbilly Elegy mentioned in the previous panel, and I will say that I have some strong refutations of J.D. Vance that I'm happy to talk to any of you at length about over a beer. But suffice to say that Appalachia is a lot more complicated than people understand. It is a place with a history of extraction, not only extraction of coal, but also extraction of people's knowledge and their labor. People have been going in and trying to tell stories about Appalachia for a long, long time, and then they leave and they tell the stories to other people, and Appalachia never sees a cent from it. So we find that broadband is also a part of media justice. It's a part of, restoring our people to the narrative. And that is my time up? Is that what is going on? Okay. Okay. I guess. Okay. Well, the last thing that I wanted to say, I guess, was that we found that broadband access, it's a precondition to stability for people. There's a lot of change we want to make, but we can't do it until people have access to the ability to feed their family, to education, just to these like personal life things that a lot of us take for granted. So that's why we're working on it. We're eager to learn more about the tech side of things because we're not experts on it yet, but we are experts in our people. We are experts in what they need. And we hope to be listened to on that. And just want to say that I think that people in Appalachia really love their home and they should be able to thrive in it. So, yeah.
Hello, IGF USA. Thank you, Judith, Dr. Lee, other organizers for having us here. So I'm with Comcast, and as one of the largest broadband providers in the country, obviously, you know, we very much share the belief that connectivity is essential in the 21st century digital economy. We all know that those who are online have better access to education, to job training, job placement, and even healthcare. And so we wanted to help bring the dream of broadband to more Americans, regardless of their income level and regardless of where they live. And so about 7 years ago, we created a program called Internet Essentials, which today it's the largest and most successful broadband adoption program in the country. We've connected so far over 4 million Americans and counting in 1 million households. And basically we offer a discounted service for $9.95 a month and discounted computers. And the key component to the program is digital literacy training, which is what, Donna, you were talking about. You know, it's very much the key metric for success in the program. So when we were designing the program, we looked at who's online, who's not online, and why. And what we found was that the share of Americans who have access to broadband but choose to not adopt is about 3 times, or a little over 3 times, the number of Americans who don't have broadband. So why? Why are these Americans not adopting? And what the research shows, studies by the Census Bureau and NTIA, seems to show is that the main hindrance seems to be a lack of relevance, or it's a perceived lack of relevance, which is related to the concept of digital literacy that Donna was talking about. So we emphasize that component of the program. We think it's the key to the success of the program. You know, people are more likely to adopt broadband when they have a concrete understanding of what it can do for their daily lives. We also partner with thousands of local community leaders and partners all across the country to get the word out about the program and offer the training that's needed. We also cater to a diverse set of communities. Our materials are available in 14 different languages. So we think that's all of that has helped to drive success with the program, and we're very proud of it. You know, we think it's made a real world impact in the lives of millions of Americans. It's heartwarming to hear story after story of the change that's brought to people's daily lives. I could run through a bunch of numbers, but I won't. Suffice it to say that most people who subscribe to the program are very happy with it. They think it's had a very positive impact on their children's education and on their own professional development and quality of life. So going forward, we are continuing to invest in Internet Essentials. We started the program by targeting school-age children because we wanted to help narrow the homework gap. But over the years, we've expanded eligibility to residents of HUD housing and to seniors and community college students. We have pilots for the latter 2 groups. And we're hoping to expand eligibility beyond that. We've also increased speed speeds many times. We've added in-home Wi-Fi so that you can connect on any device. We've also added 40 hours of access to Xfinity hotspots, 18 million Xfinity hotspots all over the country. So looking forward, we're very proud of the impact that the program has had, but we think there's a lot more to be done, and certainly want to help bring the promise of the internet to millions more Americans.
Good morning. My name is Susan Strachan, and I am going to read also, and I apologize for that, but I would like to stay on my time. I'm with California State University Chico, the Geographical Information Center. We are an applied research center. We have a wide broadband portfolio. One of our major items in that portfolio is measuring broadband under contract to the California Public Utilities Commission. We do their mobile broadband measurement program across the state. We're currently working on a fixed broadband measurement program. We have collaborated with the San Francisco Bay chapter of the Internet Society on a fine-grained analysis of mobile broadband in farm fields, which is we believe, the first study of that access. And so I'd like to thank them for the opportunity to be here. We also facilitate rural broadband consortia in 10 counties in northeastern California, which is basically the size of Ohio. This is not your California where there's Disneyland and surfing and Silicon Valley and bros, in gray hoodies. This is the California where there are rice fields and nut orchards and timber harvest. So like most of the rural U.S., broadband connectivity is a challenge. Ditto on the literacy and adoption, but connectivity is definitely a challenge for us. 76% of rural California households do not have broadband, while 99% of urban households do. So it's a huge difference for us. The economic equity issue I'd like you to consider today is that educational access is hampered in rural areas because of the new increasing focus on online education. California is starting a standalone online community college, absolutely 100% online. It will include both associate's degrees as well as technical training. At the same time, California is now offering your first year free of community college if you are a first-time freshman. So if you combine those two evolutions, which are just absolutely fantastic, but there are people that can't afford to move where there is better internet. So research at our university shows that students much prefer face-to-face instruction. Almost 90% of the students who are in our online program surveyed said they would much rather be face-to-face. But then they also say, you know what? 40% of them say face-to-face online is almost as good. But the problem is that the standards for broadband service, California abysmally at 6 megabytes down, 1 megabyte up, Connect America Fund at 10 megabytes down, 1 megabyte up, do not support face-to-face online video. 1 megabyte up is just not going to do it for you. DSL with its poor latency is just, I've learned these technical things. You'll get them. Poor latency is not going to do it for you. So the federal government has started requiring their infrastructure grant funders to provide 25.3. 25.3 should not be aspirational. 25.3 should be a floor. So we hope that in the funding broadband that they are able to provide the service that is going to serve distance education. This is a matter of equity. Many students in rural areas can't afford to move to where they can get better internet. So with this opportunity that's available in California now between free first year and online community college, it is only effective if you have sufficient internet.
So thank you for inviting me to represent the Native communities and coming from California as well. Typically, we're left out of some of this stuff, and it's why we're fighting this broadband fight. All the panelists have touched on things that affect the tribes specifically. Libraries were our first foray into this. We decided that the libraries were the hub for the community to be able to connect after-school resource programs and get the kids on the internet and bring this to the community. And growing out this network that we've built at the Southern California Tribal Digital Village, which is the 19 federally recognized tribes in San Diego County and some in Riverside County. when we first built this out, we were looking at, the speeds weren't very fast and the requirements weren't very large. And, as things have evolved over the years, we all know that bidirectional video communication is kind of the standard high definition amount of pipeline we need, and we need to do that multiple times over, one network and be able to pull this off. So we've been looking at opportunities. The reservations were designed to keep Native Americans where they wanted them, sometimes not where they traditionally lived, and the deal was that they had to provide resources to those people that they put on those spots. Well, the follow-through hasn't been there. The telcos and the big incumbents haven't followed through with their results. I mean, I follow people on panels all the time that are like 98.5% of America connected, and I'm like, yeah, I'm the 1.5 over here, the Native Americans. Remember us? And so we've taken it upon ourselves across the country to try to change this. In the last decade, I've been heavily entrenched in policy in DC, in Sacramento for California's efforts, and have been working to try to identify better pathways to do this. And the creativity, working with Nicol on several other panels over the last couple of years, we know there's a gap, right? That we know we don't have the connectivity, but the connectivity is everything to these communities. We have about 50% unemployment. We're a long ways away from the resources, so we have to have access to online to be able to survive and move into the next, even decade, let alone century. So some creativity has happened in the Native American space where, we get a hold of something and we get an opportunity to do something, we typically flourish. And there are some shining examples of connectivity around the United States on Native American reservations where they've had access. Coeur d'Alene Red Spectrum is a phenomenal program that's happening, and Valerie Fast Horse runs that. The Nez Perce tribe has put together a radio station, connectivity. They became their own spin number for E-rate because there's no providers. I mean, everything that we can do to be able to fast track and open the doors to get the access to the internet is happening. Tribal Digital Village, we have 106 tribal municipalities connected. We have connected upwards of 500 homes. We've got some attrition there because we're running on solar, so trying to stay up during clouds is tough. So we're actually building out the 3.5 version of our network, where we are putting about $40,000 worth of solar at every single tower, and battery backup, and then generator backup to be able to support no interruptions. So in all of the things that I've done on the ground and all of the things I've done in policy, in the last administration of the United States government, I was in and out of the White House with the CTO of the United States, Megan Smith, and we were talking about communication deserts, which they typically focus on other continents. But I said, hey, focus on America. There's 573 Native American tribes that are federally recognized. There's 320 reservations in the lower 48. And, the FCC promotes that they have 40% connectivity. And on the ground, I can tell you we do, because we have a network, but I can name off 400 that don't. And so there's no way we're at 40%. So the creativity came to the point where you had to look at options on, where's the missing link? Where's the piece that's gone? Right, you have funding, nobody cares about the tribes, whatever, but where's the piece that's missing in the puzzle? How do we fix this? So we identified the fact that the middle mile fiber never gets on the reservation. So if you were going to do it yourself, you didn't have access to middle mile fiber to do anything anyway. So we are in the process of finishing up a mapping phase that has taken all the carriers in the US, we've gotten all their mapping, all of their KMZ files, we've laid them over top of the overlay of the reservations. We've gotten distance measurements and clearest obvious easement paths to the reservation, and we're doing a cost analysis on what that would actually cost. $1 billion, what is it going to be to get middle mile onto each reservation at some key anchor institutions, so that the tribes could entertain another company to come on, because that infrastructure cost of the middle mile is why a lot of people won't deploy. There may be enough homes, but getting from where they're at to the home is the thing that's stopping them from doing it. So if we can figure out a way to get that middle mile onto the tribe's reservations, then if the tribe has the wherewithal, they'll pull it off themselves. If not, we have brilliant organizations like Ameren Risk Management, who started up the Critical Infrastructure Division. We have a representative here We have a lot of different groups that are willing to scale and move out and help other tribes do this. We have a for-profit side of our group that will scale and go out and do things. So it's really that how do we look at something new, because connectivity is everything to the tribes because they don't have access. And as all of the examples were displayed here, especially the online community college, which is one of the key ones for Native Americans, there are so many kids that graduate from high school and don't need to get off the reservation to school. Maybe just didn't make it into, or they didn't have a parent or that helped them transition into the application process of college. But this online community college scenario would be phenomenal. It would be a step into it. It would maybe the first year online and go to your 4-year school or do whatever you need to do. But these are the kind of things that aren't happening, and tribes are trying to make this happen on their own. So hopefully we'll have a report soon this year to be able to pull that off. Thank you.
Let's give all of the panelists a round of applause. And let's give Judith and Greta a round of applause for actually putting this together. All right. So before we break out into the roundtables, I have like this great fortune of sort of summarizing what we heard and seeing if the panelists want to contribute any additional insight. So I have to tell you, as I'm listening to all of you, that I almost have tears in my eyes. Because I did this work starting in the Community Technology Center movement back in, I know I look 15, but I'm old. But back in the early 90s or mid 90s, we were building tech centers in communities throughout the country. Watched this term evolve from digital divide. I saw my dear friend Larry somewhere over here, Irvin, who actually peaked that. Remember Larry, you and BK Fulton and others, it was digital divide. When I was at One Economy, we started talking about digital inclusion. Then it went to digital equity, and now I heard something that's, digital human rights that we're actually talking about now. And so we've come a long way, and this case for the digital divide as we know it today, from all of your presentations, appear to be less binary. It's no longer about, does a person have a device? Does a person just have the training? Does the person just have internet access? It's actually all of those factors that lend themselves to people's participation in this new civil society. The title of my book is called Digital Invisibility, because the internet is creating many of the new underclass or the next underclass that we're actually seeing. So given that, and the fact that we have like this very robust panel of government, entrepreneurs, industry, right, who are all trying to solve this, community leaders, I just have a question for all of you, and this will actually demonstrate if you were listening to each other with all of the technical disruptions. What are some of the common themes? Let's put our hands around what you think you've heard from your colleagues in terms of, where should we be thinking about, the top 3 things that came out of this conversation before we pivot over to the roundtables.
Sure. I definitely hear supporting libraries. I think that's like a big, big theme, that libraries are one of the most important community spaces. You don't have to pay to be there. They're public sources of internet. In some counties in Tennessee, we only have one. And people will drive 2 hours over the mountain gravel roads to go there and apply for a job at Applebee's. Like, is extremely important that they are there. And we need more of them, and they need to be better funded. So that's like my big takeaway. Community infrastructure, libraries, and especially in schools as well. We need to be definitely funding digital literacy in our schools and understanding that not all students have access to internet at home. So.
Nicole, so what I got out of it is something that I believe has been the same thing I've got out of since I was born and since this country was created. We all have one desire, which is to improve the lives of our citizens. We just happen to have new tools to do it with. But there's nothing different about what we're trying to do here or any other conference you're going to attend. The idea is to how do we improve the lives of citizens, including your own. There is no other. This is you. And so for me, what we've done is we've partnered with the universities, private sector, stakeholders, but most importantly with the community. And if there's one other theme, it's we all care about community. What we have to do now, though, is allow the community to co-develop, co-design, co-invest in this next infrastructure so that it is built for equity. So we don't want to lose the real vision here, which is this is all about improving the lives of our citizens. That means our systems are more fair. That means our companies are more fair. We're not creating second-class digital citizens. Everyone deserves a shot. So I heard that amongst everyone in their own way. But it's so important for all of you who are working in your own communities, in your own neighborhood, in your own city. Don't forget the fact, like in New York, right? My community, the same 4 problems I heard 20 years ago, and I can beat you, Nicole. Larry and I were working on this stuff in 1988. So, and so, yeah, he was in college and I was in kindergarten. But the 4 things in New York that you hear is noise, garbage, rats, and maybe crime. Those 4 have been always the same all the way. What's been missing is getting the community's input to say, how do we solve these issues? Getting the private sector involved. The government alone can't do it. So I think it's a collective.
Okay, we'll pass the mic here. As the mic is coming down, so please say that tonight, when we look at the technology ecosystem, here, okay. There's the 3 C's, constituents, consumers, and citizens, and they're all the same person.
I think an interesting theme today is that if you think about electricity and how important it is to our society, that's where broadband is headed right now. And then we're all workarounds at this table. We are not, we are trying to get around the problems of not having broadband and not having people trained in broadband. So I find it interesting that, what is the role of government in this? I think that's an important question for us to consider.
Right.
Well, I think there's a big contrast between the last session and this session. That session dealt with more of the macro, economics, long-term, big picture. We're down to individuals in here. And I think all of us are in this business that we're in, doing what we do because we want to help change people's lives for the better. I think libraries, and I'm sure these other organizations, measure their effectiveness by how has a person's life been enriched by their interaction with us? What have we empowered them to do? And it's about individual empowerment. And the other observation I want to make is I think the United States is often in denial about some of its economic problems. So IFLA spearheaded an effort to get access to information, part of the UN Sustainable Development Goals, which every country in the world has signed on to achieve by 2030, the 2030 Agenda. We hardly ever hear about these goals in the United States, and yet every single problem that we're talking about in this room, education, health, access to information about, helping farmers, etc., all of this is part of what the UN is trying to help us all achieve by 2030. And if you're interested in more of this and how technology and access to technology affects all of this, I recommend this Development and Access to Information 2017 report. It's on the IFLA website, www.ifla.org. We all need data to persuade decision makers. There's a lot of data in this report that I think you'll find helpful.
So Matthew and Anthony have 30 seconds. I got to wrap
So-
up and get it over. So we'll pass back at 30 seconds.
I just want to make a comment about last panel, this panel, and the future of how things are working. Innovation is key to keep things moving forward. Growth, all that kind of stuff is essential to advance, and I understand that, and it's great we focus on that. The problem, however, is, and it's worldwide, is that we're always looking at the next shiny object. 5G rollout is coming. We don't have 4G yet on the reservations, so what the hell? So, if you're going to go do this kind of stuff, you're going to do this innovative kind of stuff, that's great. But you need to think cyclical and turn back around and look who's not on board. And how does this new technology support the community that's maybe not even connected yet? Can we leapfrog to the new technology and be connected on that instead of going through the iterations of connectivity to get to 5G or whatever the next phase of the networking is? If you look at the technology that's being developed, it isn't taking into account these communities. It is for the mainstream, the masses, the population densities, and it is not focused on supporting the rest of the world that isn't connected or barely connected.
I would also like to add quickly, I really appreciated how not paternalistic the tone was on this panel. So instead of saying, we need digital equity because I really want you to pursue this thing and I want this future for you, this panel seemed to really be about digital equity is important because people should be able to create the future they want.
Whew. Okay, so now I have this task. Oh, I see Evan. Evan, raise your hand from Commissioner Carr's office. You guys just put out a really great telehealth initiative. You want to just stand up and say what you're doing too? Not to put you on the spot. Just, okay. Yeah. We need a microphone? Okay. Just tell us what you're doing.
You want me to summarize the initiative?
Yeah, summarize the initiative.
Okay, yeah. So, hi, I'm Evan Swartztraber. I'm a policy advisor to FCC Commissioner Brendan Carr. Next week, we'll be voting on beginning the process of establishing a $100 million telehealth pilot program. The idea is to target telehealth for low-income Americans, in particular rural areas and veterans. And we're asking questions in the item. That's our wonderful administrative law procedure. We ask questions, so we hope you guys all provide feedback. But we're looking at funding broadband connections for telehealth purposes, potentially equipment, other things like that. The inspiration for this was my boss went to Mississippi with Senator Wicker from Mississippi. The University of Mississippi Medical Center did a pilot program for diabetes, and the United States spends a ton of money on chronic illness management. And in rural areas, if you have to travel 100 miles to go to a hospital every time you want to see your doctor, that is obviously not ideal. So they found amazing cost savings in this program, improved outcomes, and we're trying to see if the FCC can support similar projects across the country. So I would welcome you all to weigh in on that, but I think it gets to the heart of a lot of what we've heard from the panel today in terms of the doctor divide, which we're hearing more about, especially in rural areas. So thanks.
No, thanks for adding that. I've been watching that because for those of us who've been around for a while, telehealth was, remember, our use case, our original use case when it came to the digital divide. Okay, so now I have this task of doing something that I don't often do, but I'm going to try it out anyway, which is to get you all engaged in some way. And so we talked about it, and I'm going to try my hardest to make sure this it's executed the way that we've actually talked about it. But the goal is to get each of your roundtables to sort of take some of these themes that we've discussed, and what we really would like to do so that this does not become a common digital divide, digital equity conversation where we sort of leave knowing the things that we have to do but no action plan, is to get you all in your tables to prioritize what you think might be 1 to 2 interventions or recommendations or proposals that could move the needle in this area. So I wrote down some themes that I've identified from the group that I think I want to target for each of the tables. One area is on community infrastructure, which could also include the technical infrastructure. So I'd like to assign, and I'm going to actually, Tom, I'll put your group on this, right? To have a discussion on community technical infrastructure and what will be required of, what could be 1 to 2 or 1 to 3 recommendations that could actually be useful to sort of move the needle on this conversation. I'm going to give this group over here how to improve public-private sector partnerships. Obviously in this discussion, what Comcast is doing, what libraries are doing, what government is doing, this is cross-pollination of public-private sector partnerships, and what might be some 1 to 3 recommendations that we might focus on to sort of move the needle in that area. What are we learning from the lessons that are out there, which you've heard from Diana? What more do we need to do in that area to foster those relationships? This table right here, I'm going to give you the role of government and funding. Is there a particular place of government? Should they be more proactive? I love what Ann said in terms of Normally, government has been more paternalistic when we've actually assigned, or it's been start-stops. I go way back. Many of us started with the TOP program. Before there was a BTOP, there was a TOP program. Those programs come and go. But let's talk a little bit about, if we actually want to eviscerate the digital divide, what would be the role of government in doing that? So that will be this table. The table behind them, where I see, is that Jane, is that you? Okay, I'm gonna ask you all to talk about how do we engage other actors on the funding side, right? So there's government funding, but are there other creative solutions that we should be looking at, or we should be looking to help us sort of supplement that? Part of the challenge I think you're hearing up here is everybody's involved in a programmatic pursuit, but whether or not that actually has sustainable funding, which is the purpose of this conversation, is still for question. Larry's group, I'm actually going to give you a very interesting question, which I think relates to the panel's conversation around values. So given that the economy is changing, what might be, and Clayton actually brought this up on a call, we should be pushing ourselves not to talk about digital equity in the next 2 to 3 years. And so what should be some of those human rights values that we should be focusing on that will allow us to do so? The group that is right next to them to the right, now everybody's following your group, right? Because I'm not. Public-private sector partnerships, the role of government, other funding, the values, technical infrastructure. The group behind, we've talked about libraries as part of the community infrastructure. So Tom, I want your group to talk about technical, right? Wireless connectivity, what techno solutions, satellite, what should we be focusing on? The group behind, community infrastructure. Should we be looking at community infrastructure, libraries? Are there other groups that we should be going to sort of help us build, I think what we've heard from Donna about libraries being a critical point, are there other groups that we should be actually paying attention to? The table where Evan was sitting, last but not least, I'm going to have you look at use cases. So Evan has pointed out telehealth as a particular use case. Are there top 3 use cases that we should be putting our time in to actually focus on closing or creating more digital equity? We've heard a little bit like Caitlin talked about, hey, let's move this beyond just a simplistic conversation. Maybe we should be looking at closing the digital divide to create more economic opportunity and social mobility. That's a different conversation that we would have had about 15 years ago. So in your conversation, I'd like you to also consider in those use cases, will there be digital literacy required for those use cases to actually manifest themselves? Because telehealth, Evan, you're gonna have to cause people to do things differently, right, when it comes to telehealth, okay? And for this table, I'll give you some work, and I'll give you the big, well, you're taking notes, but I'll give you the big challenge, and I'll come over and join you. Should we be talking about how will the digital divide look like in the age of artificial intelligence, privacy, and all new emerging technologies? So what will we be talking about in the next 5 years when it comes to digital equity? Okay? So everybody has their assignments? Okay. Oh, what do I have to do? Okay, so here is the instruction. You have 15 minutes, just 15 minutes. I'll give you a 5-minute countdown. I just need 3 bullets, because there's a lot of tables up in here, for summary, and then our panelists will take it all in and do a final response. All right, time starts now. You all can join. All right, so public-private sector partnerships. If you can, we only got 15 minutes. I'm kind of changing up structure so we can keep it going, but if you can. All right, technical infrastructure deployment, use cases, community infrastructure, institutions, etc. Just think through. Back there, values, principles. Yep, right here, community infrastructure. Funding outside of government. Other lucrative funding sources. The role of government. And how will the digital divide look like with AI, emerging technology?
family's there, your roots there. You may not be financially able to move. But then if you have all these, but then if you create all these cool digital employment opportunities, like what we had in the earlier session about future of work, then maybe there's some long-term return on that investment. Just think of it as a business from a government standpoint. You make the investment in, say, Kansas, suddenly it's not so much about people unable to farm anymore because AI and automation has taken over all the labor, and now they can create digital entrepreneurs instead, and then it doesn't matter where you live. So I don't know. So I guess our points are what we got two. There's probably some tax policy and also some public-private infrastructure policies that.
What you just said, remind me, we had a regional broadband summit in Pittsburgh this past week, Monday and Tuesday, and a young fiber talked there, and she talked about how when it comes to broadband, especially rural broadband, you need to make the business case for everything. Like without appliances and recycling, there just needs to be a business. So maybe that would be a public point is that even when it comes to private sector, you need to make a business case for that to show it as a business.
Like that. Like it's the role of government to advocate on behalf of their community to private companies. Like this is why you should be investing in them.
For some reason, I think there's a tendency to forget that private enterprise is also part of the community. They get taxed as well. They have offices. They have needs, and so I think it's important for the government to also serve and protect the interest of the enterprise as well as the individual.
Which is why you need to view it as an investment, right? Because if it's an investment and they're going to get money back on it eventually, then it is going to protect and it is going to be good for everyone.
Right.
I'm not sure if you've talked about one of the things that the government is not doing at all on the internet is monitoring all the garbage mail we get. Either they're fraudsters or they're just wasting our time. I can't believe that there's so many people, either they're doing it using bots or so many parties on the internet who have time to send you all kinds of garbage emails, which are meaningless, and then there are with angle to cheat you. So that's where the government also needs to have a role, in my opinion, and they're not doing it at all. Even if you've been cheated, you contact the FBI, they don't do anything, they take your report. That's it. Where it's filed, nobody knows.
I think the challenge of that is then who tells the government what is good and what's not? Because some of those might be marketeers, and you think about robocalling, which the U.S. FCC is trying to address.
Right.
And you think about
we have to file complaints.
Spam in the 80s was like all the junk mail that showed up in your mailbox.
There should be a forum where you can file a complaint, and they should listen. They should hear. Right now, nothing exists. You file a complaint as if it goes into a dead letter box, and that's it. So there should be a little more of it than looking into it. Like we have court system for transactions, without the court system, there'll be a lot more cheats around,
So did you just volunteer to be our spokesperson?
Oh, I guess I did. But so okay, so let me summarize.
Anna?
And you guys
I'm the mic runner.
You're holding the mic.
I'm the mic runner.
Okay, so let me know if you guys feel like this is an accurate summary. So we have three.
She should be at the table. So she has to navigate through
The second is
taxation policy includes tax cuts.
depends on who you ask. Yeah.
That's where we are right now.
True. Creating infrastructure or creating policies that encourage infrastructure deployment and equity, and then creating an environment that's friendly for private investment, also through making the right business case for why private companies should be investing of creating the right environment for private investment?
No, I don't actually believe in that strategy.
Okay.
I think that too often sort of cities will give up their assets because they want to create a encouraging atmosphere for private investment, and then they sort of lose their leverage. Because if you walk into a negotiation saying you can have here's the store, we just want you to invest, then you walk in and you've already given up all your leverage. So the cities see that their assets, their mounting assets, and they need to regulatory power, their ability to create local jobs programs. Cities have lots of power that they can bring to the negotiating table and ask that if companies want franchises, that they have to give back to the community.
So I'm a little puzzled because I know some cities do have that competency and they do in fact leverage that in their negotiations for franchise agreements. But I suspect some are probably completely clueless and don't. So I imagine we have this huge spectrum. So is there like some overarching way we address that or solve that? Is that the meta question you're raising? How do we encourage municipalities to share best practices perhaps in franchising
So, could I suggest that something that might hit the middle ground here of creating good partnerships would be the role of government at the federal and state level to, when creating legislation, not take those different cards off of the table on either the city or private side.
Oh, absolutely.
For example,
leave the negotiation power with the local municipality?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to ask people to start winding down. Please make sure that you have a reporter. Make sure you have a reporter who's actually going to do your 3 bullets. Okay. If you have about 30 seconds to get that last piece in there. Okay. 10 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I knew that would get people's attention. Don't give me a mic. I like karaoke. Okay. All right. I'm going to ask everybody to sort of wind down. Man, this is the first group I haven't had to do. I have a 11-year-old and a 15-year-old, and when I need their friends to be quiet, I go, if you hear me clap once, if you hear me clap twice. And then everybody, all the adults, I've done that with adults, and they're like, this is such a familiar trigger. And everybody knows how to be quiet. All right, so what we want to do, because we're still cut up with time and we want to be mindful of the remainder of the conference, what we're going to do is we're going to have each reporter just report out in less than 3 minutes the 3 bullets that you came up with. Now, clearly, I'm sure that you have commentary I'm going to leave it to Judith and Dustin to keep the channels open if you want to contribute more commentary to your particular area. But again, if I could ask you all to be mindful as we go around, just to give your 3 bullets. At the end of every table's presentation, I'm going to have the panelists sort of be the Shark Tank and come back up and just sort of summarize what they've heard based on their own presentations and their own work that they're doing. And as I said, Judith is going to be taking notes, so this will be documented. So we are going to follow, I assume, the Chatham House rules, and we'll be aggregating the information. We're not going to be assigning comments to particular people. Okay. So Judith, is that right? Or are you going to be outside of the panelists? Are you going to be assigning? Okay. So it's not necessary for you to say your name and your contact for your table. Okay, so we have 2 mics going. Why don't we start with the role of government?
Is this on? Yep. So for the role of government, we talked about 3 main bullet points. The first is that it's the role of government to determine the correct taxation policy when encouraging broadband deployment. Oh, okay. Standing up. Hi, everyone. Our table didn't necessarily determine what that taxation policy should be because that's the role of the government to do in each specific instance. The second is creating policies that encourage infrastructure deployment and equity. Some examples are things like dig once or one touch make ready. And the third thing we talked about is specifically on the state and federal level when creating legislation, making sure that that legislation leaves cards on the table for both cities and industry to create meaningful public-private partnerships. Anything else to add? Yep.
So we talked about how in order to push for public-private sector partnerships, we need to have an inclusive strategy so that all voices will be at the table so we can get the best outcome. And some of the questions we explored were how to ease communication between divided groups. So we talked about how a lot of times experts in the field need to hear from the people, the consumers that they're serving, but they don't necessarily know how to speak the same lexicon as them or just get what they need from them. So we talked about that and removing the middleman at the table so that when everybody's at the table, there's no conduits speaking for each other and kind of creating misinformation. And then we also talked about how important it is to co-design and co-build from the beginning of the process.
And I'm asking all the reserving questions, okay? Okay, let's go over to the role of infrastructure tech and infrastructure.
Hi, I'm Nilmi Rubin with Tetra Tech. Our table had a really interesting discussion on community infrastructure and technology. We started with the number 1 thing really being about people. You can't do it unless you know what people want. So even though we're the technical group, we did start with the human side. And then we talked a lot about infrastructure policy and of conceptualizing what makes sense on whether it's spectrum or shared infrastructure. But we have to have like a cohesive policy framework in order to best utilize the technology that makes sense for the different situations and the different communities. And on the actual piece of technology and infrastructure, we talked about different solutions for different places, like 5G being in cities, but maybe not appropriate for a rural area, that maybe that makes sense on fixed wireless or fiber in the middle and wireless at the last mile. But I think at the heart of it, it came down to people and policy around whether or not the technology made sense for that location.
Perfect. Let's go to the role of other funding sources.
Stand over here. Hello, I'm Jane. I'm from the Internet Society. And what we talked about, much of what Nilmani just said about people, there were 3 main bullets that we came up with for this funding. 1, priorities. Know the priorities of your target, as their priorities may not sync with your infrastructure development priorities per se. Some ministries don't get it that they need connectivity to make something happen. Messaging. Explain the problem well using social media, videos, stories, information, data. This comes from our data hound here, my colleague Leah. If you can't tell the story and explain why you need that connectivity, your message is not going to get through. Find workarounds. Matt described the problem that some tribal communities have. They can't put the land or the houses up for collateral. So maybe spectrum. Give them a little spectrum. They could use that as a little collateral. And that spectrum issue is a big one across the world. But anyway, priorities, messaging, find workarounds. There are a lot of different sources, but it does come back to people and a lot of DIY.
All right, so we came up with 3 use cases: Netflix, Hulu, and Amazon. No. Yeah. Just kidding. The opposite of that. No, so we talked about, especially, rural America has been a big theme of this whole discussion. So we talked about use cases, particularly in those areas. Healthcare, already mentioned, remote patient monitoring, bridging the doctor divide, basically being able to access specialists across the entire country and world instead of just maybe where you live, if there are none, or maybe one. Agriculture is a big one. One example is if you sell a product and without broadband, your access to customers is very limited to wherever you are. Whereas if you have a broadband connection and your customers have broadband connection, you could have potentially thousands of customers, if not more, whether it's cattle or crops or whatever you're selling. And also, of course, the smart ag applications like IoT, drones monitoring crops, things like that. And then, of course, education is a huge one. I think we talked a lot about upskilling and job training through education online, as opposed to just relying on the 4-year degree as a shortcut for whether someone is, trained for a job. You're able to use broadband to get the specific skills you need for a job, and then the potential employer can make sure that you have those skills using broadband. So training for specific jobs instead of just kind of winging it. So I guess, to summarize, healthcare, education, and agriculture as use cases.
So we came up with 3 things. We were focusing on already existing community infrastructure. So we wanted the cities and local governments to make public spaces more inclusive with new hours and digital literacy programs. For example, libraries shut down at right around the time people need to do homework and get online. Then we thought we should leverage already existing city resources, again, like libraries, public spaces, courthouse. Those are already paid for. In particular, bandwidth costs for those places are paid for, particularly at after they're closed for the day. That stuff is open. And then we decided that because of these 2 things, we should work with local city and state governments to supply funding and political will.
All right. I want to go to the last group that goes to the values.
Hi, Nicolas from Maltarmundi. Okay, so 3 bullets, as she said. One is culture first. So if we are trying to push this proposals that you have been exploring this in the panel, we need to put the local cultures first. Like it could be the First Nation cultures, but also the urban particulars of each community. Our internet is taking us to a space where everything is homogeneous. Everything is like a monoculture, and we are losing the diversity, losing the interesting little bits of each community. So culture needs to be first. Then there is the matter of choice. One thing that also happens less in urban areas, but much more in rural areas, is both being able to have the chance to be connected, but also being able to opt to be connected or not, and how, and in what in what way, and how much. And this also tackles a problem in urban places where we can't choose not to be connected or not. And in rural or First Nation territories, it's very important because First Nation communities that have not been exposed to this, the the globalized world through internet, once they get there, they start losing a lot of cultural elements like language or like traditions or like the everyday habits. And the other thing that needs to be tackled is, the other value is, what value, like key thing that we need to value is local first. Understanding that communities, like internet starts from the leaves, not from the from the cloud, let's say, right? So it's the first mile first, and that means we need to think solutions that are we need to evolve solutions that are peer-to-peer based, distributed, decentralized, not in a centralized way like fog computing, but having servers locally or training in these areas.
All right, last but not least, what should we expect in terms of the next 5 years with emerging technologies like AI, algorithms, robots, automation, and all that other good stuff?
So, our blue marble view says, we have 3 points. The current issues that are surrounding the digital divide will be impacted even more by such emerging technologies as AI, artificial intelligence, machine learning, robotics, and something that people may or not be familiar with. We heard some conversation about agriculture. Well, AERO farms, which are now combining powerful Internet of Things with their architecture and horticulture to actually grow crops indoors. What's the impact of that? The second item we have is the widening social and economic inequality, which is really causing more competition, and we feel an escalated competition among groups who have and are behind, groups who are moving towards this new economy and actually this new ecosystem of living. And then the third item, which the group mentioned on values, we also said we've got cultural and values, that whole perspective is going to change into what we said, it's going to be disruptive, it's going to be reshaped, and the question we left as an open-ended question, to what?
So, you know, since he ran up here, Matt, you want to close us out? Because I feel bad all the other people are leaving. Oh, you want to comment on that? Because I'm like, oh, they just done early? Because, you know, I don't want to be that teacher or that. Okay, good. Okay.
So on the concept of AI, I learned a very interesting thing from an individual that spoke to the National Congress of American Indians, and he brought in the technology, understanding that if these communities, Native Americans, the black community, the Mexican community, all the Hispanic different groups, if we are not involved with programming the AI will eliminate us in the future.
So I'll just add on to that. Even when we are not the product, we are the product, because that is where companies do not come. So you don't get Uber Eats, you don't get Airbnb, because you're outside of the digital ecology. And if you do not have the collateral to participate, not just the technology, but a bank account, you are further experiencing inequality. And Caitlin said it, you don't have transportation, guess what? You will never have transportation. You will grow less healthy and wealthy and educated because of that. All right. I was going to ask our panelists to respond. If there is a panelist who was speaking earlier, I could kind of just pick one out because Clayton is the closest, just to sort of wrap up, right?
And I'm concise.
Come on.
So again, thanks to Nicole. How about that? Give it up for Nicole. She's something else. At the end of the day, we're all responsible. This isn't like some engineers sitting in some corner that we got to wait on to make things happen. Everyone here is responsible. It's really refreshing to hear what's going on our tribal lands. I just had a good conversation with Goldman Sachs, by the way, who's very much interested in investing in middle mile infrastructure. So we'll be talking. So I think under Nicole's direction of this whole conference, or this particular session, that we're all tied together around this one thing. I think about the infrastructure of the United States. There were times when there were mostly just all dirt roads, right? And then some people got paved roads and some people didn't have them. Those who had them got a little more access, a little more opportunity, got a little bit ahead. Eventually it came where more streets had gotten built and paid, and we all can sort of navigate. I look at that with broadband. there will come a moment where all will have equal broadband. But it takes voices like this to make that happen sooner than later. So I hope that we can stick to this same sort of discipline we've had right here, which is to work together to solve big problems, and they will be solved, but they'll be solved a lot quicker if we work together in an inclusive manner. We need everybody at the table, as this table talked about. My friend who's written 3 books, produced 2 movies, speaks 5 languages, PhD, she's 100% blind. That has, she's looking at it like, he's describing me. So the point is that if we do something for the least of us, it will impact and help the rest of us.
Thanks, Clayton. So I want to just say thank you to the facilitators of this session. We would not be here without Greta, raise your hand, from the new school, Dustin, and Judith. Thanks to all the panelists. Let's give them another round of applause for their participation. They were all up there. Follow each of those panelists on Twitter. Hopefully we can come back, like they say in my community, y'all come back now, you're here. Let's come back a year later and let's actually have this conversation again, okay? Thank you very much.
Oh my God, I'm like,